Hey guys, welcome back to Sleeping Stone Whispers, where history breathes in whispers and dreams. Tonight's story, The Winter Cures of Filth and Faith, takes you into a frozen medieval world where sickness ruled, and people trusted frogs, prayers, and filth to chase away the fever. It's a slow, strange, and haunting journey through the winter of old Europe, where faith met dirt, and hope smelled like onions and wine. So grab your blanket, settle in, and let this forgotten world unfold. And hey, if you love drifting through strange corners of history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to keep the whispers coming. When the first frost crept down the valley, it did not come quietly. It whispered across the roofs, silvering every thatch and turning the puddles to thin, crackling glass. The breath of the villagers turned to ghosts in the morning air, and even the church bells seemed slower, duller, as though the cold had taken hold of the metal too. In that village, a cluster of damp cottages crouched beside a crooked stream. Winter meant sickness. Every year it arrived as faithfully as Sunday Mass. Children coughed through the nights, elders wheezed beside the hearth, and mothers whispered half-remembered prayers learned from their mothers before them. The men swore that the frost carried spirits, that the breath of the dead returned with the cold, hovering unseen over the chimneys. There was no doctor here, not really. There was only Mistress Alwyn, the midwife and healer, who smelled of onions, smoke, and the earth itself. She moved through the cottages with her wooden spoon and cracked pot, muttering blessings while mixing herbs and animal fat. Her hands were always warm, everyone noticed that, even when the world outside froze. The villagers trusted her more than the priest some days, though they'd never say it aloud. When a child's throat grew red and swollen, she would mash boiled onions into a rag and tie it round the neck, whispering, "Let the warmth draw out the devil." When that failed, she'd smear goose fat over the chest and light a candle beside a jar of wine, believing the fumes might chase away whatever haunted the lungs. The priest disapproved. Father Hauric said illness came from sin, not from air or water. On Sundays, he stood at the altar, voice echoing off the frozen stone, warning that the fever was God's whisper of punishment, and only confession could heal the soul enough to save the body. The villagers listened, heads bowed, but as soon as the sermon ended, they hurried to Mistress Alwyn's door, clutching small coins and larger hopes. Outside, the frost thickened each night. The stream stiffened under a glassy skin, and even the hens stopped laying. Smoke curled from chimneys, heavy and sour with the scent of burning peat and sickness. Somewhere in the woods, a fox coughed, or maybe it was a child, wandering too far. One night, a sound rose from the far end of the village, a long, dry wheeze followed by a cry. Mistress Alwyn lifted her shawl and went out with her lamp. She passed the silent church, where frost clung to the cross like a shroud, and reached a small cottage where a mother sat weeping over her boy. The child's lips were blue, his throat swollen like ripened fruit. "Bring me the onions," Alwyn whispered. "And the wine." The mother obeyed, trembling. Alwyn worked in silence, the way she always did, laying the poultice on the boy's throat, then making him sip the bitter wine. She hummed something soft, not a hymn, but an older melody, a winter charm that smelled of smoke and soil. The candle flickered. The frost climbed higher up the window. When morning came, the boy still breathed, weak but alive. The mother kissed Alwyn's hands. Outside, the first snow began to fall, soft as dust, covering the footprints that led to the healer's door. In the village square, Father Hauric rang the bell for morning prayer, his voice steady and cold. He didn't ask who had lived or died that night, he only spoke of faith and of penance, and of the need to stay pure in thought and deed. But as the villagers knelt, someone whispered that Mistress Alwyn's onion had worked again. And for one more day, Faith and Filth lived side by side, holding the sickness at bay. The frost had deepened by the second week of December. It clung to the church spire and crept along the window ledges like white mold. The sun rose pale and thin each morning, barely warming the world before slipping away again. The villagers spoke less, as if words might freeze in their mouths. But in one house, the one nearest the mill road, a sound would not stop. It was a cough, hollow and stubborn, rising through the night like a small hammer against silence. It belonged to old Tannic, the cooper's father, whose hands once shaped barrels for half the county. He had seen 60 winters, maybe more, and each had left a mark on him, a deeper stoop, a slower breath, a quieter laugh. Now, his laugh was gone. Only the cough remained. Mistress Alwyn was called again, her shawl drawn tight, her lamp guttering in the cold. She found Tannic propped beside the hearth, wrapped in sheepskin, eyes watery and tired. His daughter knelt beside him, muttering that he had not eaten in 2 days. He swallowed air in pain, the healer murmured, running her hand over the old man's chest. It was warm and damp beneath the cloth. The sickness is sitting here, between the ribs. From her basket, she took out a handful of crushed herbs, thyme, sage, and something that smelled sharply of vinegar. She mixed them with warm wine, then spread the pulp on a strip of linen. When she laid it on his chest, he groaned softly, the cough shaking him like a tree in wind. Hold the steam under his nose, she told the daughter. Let it sting. The spirit in the throat must be driven out. The daughter obeyed, eyes wet, lips whispering a prayer to Saint Ethelred, patron of the fevered. But Tannic's cough did not ease. It grew louder, faster, echoing down the chimney and out into the night. The priest, passing by, paused at the door. He listened for a moment, then crossed himself. He should confess, Father Howrick said softly. Sometimes the cough is the soul trying to speak its sins. Mistress Alwyn looked up, her hands blackened with herbs. And sometimes, she replied, it's the dust of the wood he's breathed for 60 years. The priest frowned but said nothing more. He left the house, his shadow long in the lamplight. That night, the villagers heard Tannic's cough through the cold, a rhythm that joined the creak of frozen branches and the whisper of the wind through the cracks. Some said they heard words in it. Others said it was the devil himself, tapping on the walls. At dawn, the sound stopped. The air was still. When Mistress Alwyn returned, she found the old man asleep, finally, deeply, without sound. His daughter sat beside him, her hands clasped, her eyes red but calm. He's resting? Alwyn asked. The girl nodded slowly. He's gone beyond the frost. The healer bowed her head. Outside, the first crows of morning landed on the church roof, black against the white. Father Howrick tolled the bell again, its heavy tone rolling through the air. He spoke of peace, of judgment, of souls rising clean into the hands of God. But in the village below, people whispered something else, that the cough had taken the old man, and that the air in the valley had turned thicker since. By evening, 2 more began to cough. And so, the frost settled deeper. The frost had eaten into everything now. The wells froze from the top down, the roofs crackled at dawn, and even the dogs walked stiffly, their paws packed with ice. The village smelled of smoke and boiled onions. That was the scent of winter survival. From every chimney, thin plumes rose into the pale sky, carrying the breath of prayers and sickness together. The church bell rang each morning, hollow and slow, but fewer people came. Some coughed too much to kneel. Others whispered that the cold made the devil bold, that he roamed between the cottages at night, counting the living by their breath. Mistress Alwyn worked without sleep. Her hands were cracked, her apron darkened with herbs and tallow. Every door she knocked on opened to the same sight, a small fire, a sweating brow, a bowl of water gone tepid. She brought her own cure for the throat sickness, onions and smoke. Boil the onions till they weep, she said to the mothers, then let the steam fill the room. Breathe it deep, it drives the evil spirit from the chest. The air in those cottages grew thick and pungent, heavy with the stinging sweetness of onion and soot. Some swore it helped. Others just said it made the crying stop for a while. In one corner of the village, an old man tied dried frog skins by his bedpost, for luck, he said. His wife hung a scrap of saint's robe beside it. Between the two, the air seemed no cleaner, but faith is a kind of warmth. At the church, Father Halrick had begun blessing bottles of water and jars of salt, calling them holy and selling them for a coin. Sprinkle your doorways, he said, and no cough shall cross. The villagers obeyed, though some whispered that his holy water froze before dawn. By the third week of frost, the sickness had spread from throat to chest. The cough came from deeper now, rattling the ribs. Children coughed until they slept, and the old coughed until they didn't wake again. Mistress Alwyn tried something new. She mixed soot from her hearth with goose fat and oil, rubbed it on the chest, and whispered over it, by warmth and faith, flee this breath. The smell filled the house, bitter, oily, alive. The neighbors gagged at the stench, but the mother whose child lay sick said it brought color back to his lips. That night, she thanked Alwyn by candlelight, pressing 2 copper coins into her hand. The healer refused at first, then took them, whispering, "Keep your fire lit. Smoke drives away more than cold." When Alwyn stepped outside, snow was falling again, slow, steady, endless. The whole world seemed to hum in the silence. From every roof, from every chimney, from every throat, came the same sigh, smoke, onion, and prayer. The priest stood by the church door, watching her. He said softly, "You meddle too close to God's work, woman." She looked up, her eyes shadowed beneath her hood. "And you stay too far from it, Father." For a moment, even the frost seemed to hold its breath. Then the bell rang, low, heavy, and mournful. Someone else had died that night. By midwinter, the village no longer smelled of bread. It smelled of smoke, sweat, and sickness. The snow outside the cottages had turned to gray slush, streaked with ash from the fires. And yet, in the midst of it all, Mistress Alwyn still walked, her basket clutched against her chest, her face hidden beneath her wool hood. To the sick, she was mercy. To the priest, she was meddling. To everyone else, she was both. She had lived on the edge of the woods for as long as anyone could remember, in a hut built half from stone, half from earth. In summer, she grew herbs there, tall ones with thin leaves and bitter smells. In winter, she relied on what the land offered, moss, bark, animal fat, and whatever the hunters left behind. She knew how to turn even filth into medicine. Some said she had learned her craft from her grandmother, a woman once burned for witchery in the next county. Others whispered that Alwyn spoke to the spirits that lingered in the frost, the white ones, they called them, who came at night and taught her cures in the language of wind. Whatever the truth, her cures worked often enough that the villagers kept her close, though their prayers for her soul grew louder each Sunday. That winter, the sickness grew crueler. The coughs became racking fits, and fever followed close behind. When no herb could help, Alwyn turned to older ways, darker ways. She began to make poultices not only from onions and fat, but from the warm muck of the fields. "The earth eats the sickness," she murmured. "What grows from dirt must know how to draw it back." She mixed the muck with honey and ashes, bound it in cloth, and pressed it to the chests of the worst afflicted. It looked obscene, but more than once, the fever broke by dawn. Word spread. People began to leave small gifts by her door, bread crusts, coins, bits of wool, even charms carved from bone. One woman brought her the still heart of a dead hare, wrapped in linen. "Use it for healing," she said. The creature died under a holy moon. Father Halric warned from the pulpit that such acts were sin. "Faith is the only cure," he said. "Not filth. Not muck. The Lord heals through purity, not through earth." But even he sent for Alwyn in secret when his own brother's cough grew deep and his lips turned purple. The healer came quietly. She said no prayer, only set her hands upon the sick man's chest and began to hum. When she left, she took nothing, not a coin, not a blessing, just a small jar of his sweat, sealed tight. No one dared ask what she did with it. The next morning, the brother breathed easier. And so the village began to divide, half in awe, half in fear. Some called her the blessed healer, others the muck witch. Children were told to keep away from her hut, but at night they could see its faint glow through the trees, a soft yellow light, swaying like a candle inside a mouth of darkness. One boy claimed he saw her kneeling in the snow, her hands buried in the earth, whispering to it. Another said he heard her laugh softly while stirring a pot that smoked green. But none could deny what she did. The dead were fewer now. The coughs grew quieter. The frost still ruled, but for the first time, there was hope, thick, dirty, human hope. And though her hut smelled of muck and mercy, people came. They always came. By the turn of January, the air in the village had grown still and heavy, as though the frost itself had grown tired of biting. The snow no longer fell, it simply lingered, pale, crusted, lifeless. The stream lay silent under its glassy skin, and the crows no longer called. In the silence, new things began to appear. Strange things. Above the beds of the sick, dried frogs hung from strings. They dangled like shriveled green lanterns, one above each pillow. Their empty eyes stared out over the sleepers, their small limbs frozen in crooked prayer. It had started with a story, one told in whispers at the hearth. Someone claimed that a merchant passing through the valley had once seen a healer in the south hang frogs to draw away fever. Soon, one household tried it. Then another. And before long, every cottage in the village had one, some small as a thumb, others bloated and brown, hanging beside wooden crosses and rosary beads. Mistress Alwyn said nothing against it. She merely watched, her lips pressed tight. "Hope," she said once, "takes many shapes. But Father Howrick was furious. On the next Sunday, he thundered from the pulpit, his breath rising white in the freezing church. "Frogs are creatures of mud," he cried, "born of filth and swamp. To hang them as saints is blasphemy. The Lord heals, not the spawn of ponds." Yet even as he spoke, half the congregation kept their eyes down. They did not want to meet his gaze. They knew what had happened, that in the house where the first frog had hung, the child had begun to breathe easier by dawn. That night, the priest tore down the frogs hanging in the chapel and burned them in a bowl of wine. The smell that rose was foul, like burned leather and rot. Smoke curled around the altar, thick and gray, making the candles sputter. By morning, the priest's throat was raw, and he coughed until he could barely speak. When Mistress Alwyn heard, she went to the church. She found him kneeling, wrapped in blankets, his lips pale. She said nothing. From her pouch, she took a small frog, perfectly dried, with a thread already through its leg. "Hang this near your bed," she said softly. "Not for worship. For warmth." The priest glared at her through watering eyes. "I will hang only the cross." She bowed slightly. "Then hang both, Father. Perhaps heaven prefers teamwork." He said nothing, but his hand trembled as she left the frog beside his prayer book. Outside, smoke from the cottages drifted up into the white sky, carrying with it the smell of onion, wax, and fear. People spoke quietly now, afraid of drawing notice. But if one listened closely at night, one could hear faint sounds through the village, the soft tapping of frogs' feet against wood as they swayed gently in the cold air. Some said it was only the wind. Others swore they heard whispering too, small and wet, like the voices of the swamp calling back to their own. But no one took the frogs down. Not even Father Howrick. And in those weeks, fewer died. The frost had lost its edge, but the air still held that hollow chill that settled in bones and lingered behind the eyes. The villagers spoke less of cold now and more of the cough, the fevers, and the strange ways they fought them. And always, always, there was wine. Not for joy, nor for warmth, but for healing. Mistress Alwyn kept jars of it lined along her windowsill, each sealed with wax and marked with the scratch of a symbol, a cross, a crescent, or a simple circle. The villagers said the jars glowed faintly by candlelight, that when she lifted one in the dark, it shone as if something inside still remembered the sun. When sickness deepened in the chest, she would take one down, unseal it, and pour the dark liquid into a wooden bowl. To it, she added a whisper, a psalm half remembered, half invented, and a slice of onion, white as bone. She called it the blood's blessing. Each house she visited smelled of the same ritual, the sour sweetness of wine, the sharpness of onion, and the low hum of prayer. The people repeated her words softly, as if afraid to wake the sickness while trying to cure it. By red and white, by warmth and breath. May the fever drink, and find its death. Father Howrick hated it. He said psalms were not meant for mixing with kitchen things. He said God did not listen through bottles. Yet when his own cough returned, low and dry, he found himself repeating the rhyme beneath his breath, tasting the sour tang of confession on his tongue. The villagers no longer saw a line between faith and cure. They hung crosses beside dried frogs, placed candles near jars of wine, and whispered scripture while stirring onions in boiling pots. They began to believe that sin could be cooked out, that faith could be swallowed. One evening, Alwyn was called to the home of a young woman named Breatha, who lay pale and still, her breath shallow. The husband had done everything: frog charms, blessed salt, even ashes from the church candles, but the fever would not yield. Alwyn knelt beside the woman, poured a spoon of warm wine into her mouth, and began to hum. The husband watched in silence. Then, desperate, he knelt too, and began to pray aloud, not the church's words, but her tune. Something in the air shifted. The fire popped once, sharp and clear, and a faint warmth spread through the small room. The woman's breathing eased. By dawn, her fever had broken. The next day, villagers said they had seen a faint red glow in the sky that night, like a wine jar held up to the moon. Some called it a miracle. Others said it was only firelight on the clouds. But all agreed, the wine worked. And from that day onward, no one drank it for celebration. It belonged to sickness now, and to the psalms whispered over it. Even Father Haurik stopped calling it sin. He began to bless the jars before Alwyn took them, saying quietly, "If heaven does not hear her voice, perhaps it will hear mine." So, the frost held steady. The sickness slowed. And the village lived between two worlds, one of prayer, one of potion, both poured from the same jar. The coughs had quieted for a while, but winter has a way of finding new cruelties. When the throats grew still, the skin began to stir. It started as a whisper, a complaint passed between doorways. "An itch," they said. Just beneath the wool. It came first to those who slept near the hearth, where heat met damp air. Then it crept to others, farmers, wives, even children. By the third week, nearly everyone in the village scratched beneath their sleeves. Under the thick wool tunics, their skin bloomed with red patches, raw and restless. No blood, no pus, only the unbearable need to claw. Mistress Alwyn was called again. She arrived one morning to find a mother raking at her own arms, leaving streaks of blood. The woman cried that something was crawling beneath her skin. Alwyn lifted the sleeve and saw tiny trails, raised, thin as thread, running along the flesh. She frowned, whispering, "The earth moves even in us." From her pouch, she brought out a small tin of tallow and herbs. She smeared it over the skin, her fingers slow and firm. The smell filled the room, a mix of mint, ash, and sheep fat. "Keep the wool away from it," she said. "And do not scratch. The worms of winter love warmth." The woman trembled. "Worms? Inside?" Alwyn said nothing more. Some things were better left unnamed. That night, the priest declared the new affliction a punishment for vanity, for those who think of comfort while others starve. He told the villagers to wear crosses against their chests, under their clothes, so that the holy wood would burn away the crawling sin. But soon he, too, began to scratch. His arms bore the same faint trails. The same restless twitch. During Mass, he hid it behind his robe, clutching his wrists beneath the pulpit as he preached of purity. The candlelight caught his eyes, hollow, tired, full of doubt. The villagers turned to Alwyn more than ever. They lined outside her hut, their sleeves rolled, their skin marked with silent shame. She gave each a jar of salve, thick, pale, and smelling of clay. She told them to smear it by moonlight, not firelight. "The light of the moon cleans without burning," she whispered. The itch eased for most. For some, it didn't. They said they could feel something small and cold moving under the skin at night. They said it whispered their names. No one slept well. The air inside the cottages grew rank with sweat and ointment. The sound of scratching filled the quiet, a slow rasping noise, soft but constant, like 1,000 tiny brushes against cloth. Then came the frost again, thick and unbroken, sealing the world in stillness. The itching faded as suddenly as it came. By morning, those red marks were gone. Only faint scars remained, like the tracks of something that had passed through and left. Father Halric called it a miracle of repentance. Mistress Alwyn called it a mercy of the moon. But in her hut, she found her jar of tallow cracked open, and something small and pale had crawled out, leaving only a trail of fine dust across the table. She stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, she blew out her candle. The frost never truly left. It only crept beneath the thatch, beneath the boards, where things with smaller lungs could still breathe. That winter, the rats grew fat. They ran beneath the cottages like shadows that squeaked. They chewed through the straw, gnawed the candle ends, and stole crumbs from bowls before the morning bell. The villagers hated them, but not enough to kill them. For rats, Father Halric said, carry the sins of the unclean. If they left, the sin would stay. So they lived together, man and rat, faith and filth, all under one roof. Old Meg, the rag seller, was the first to make use of the infestation. Her small hut by the river stank of damp and vinegar. She gathered cloth from the dead, torn shrouds, old sleeves, scraps of bedding, and boiled them in a black pot, muttering to herself. Cleanse by stink, she said. Better a foul cure than a fine death. She sold her rags to Mistress Alwyn, who tore them into bandages, dipped them in wine, and wrapped them around throats that would no longer swallow. The wine stung, the smell clung, but the people called it holy. When Meg's rags began to vanish from her doorway, she blamed the rats. But Alwyn noticed something stranger. The rags she used, the ones steeped in wine, healed faster. The ones washed in plain water turned sour, the skin beneath blackening as if burnt. No one could explain why. One night, while the moon hung low, Alwyn followed the scurrying sound to the back of her hut. There, she saw a rat dragging a scrap of red cloth through the snow. It disappeared under the boards. She lifted a loose plank. Beneath it, the rats had built a nest, a mound of chewed rags and herbs, soaked in spilled wine. It glowed faintly in the dark, a wet shimmer like the breath of the sick. The rats slept curled within it, their tiny sides rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Alwyn stared. Then whispered, "Blessed are the beasts who mend what men cannot." In the weeks that followed, she began leaving scraps of bread near the floor. A quiet offering. People said her hut smelled worse than ever, but her patience lived longer. Father Halric disapproved. "Cleanse your floor, woman. Filth invites the devil." Alwyn smiled softly. "Perhaps. But he's a better healer than most priests." That night, the priest dreamt of fur scratching at his door. By dawn, the frost had deepened. The rats were gone. The villagers woke to find every rag in Alwyn's hut soaked through, but not with wine. With something darker, thicker, that smelled faintly of iron. And the strange thing was, every wound wrapped in that dark cloth healed within a day. The faithful called it a miracle. The fearful called it a curse. Alwyn, silent, called it winter's mercy. No one liked to speak of the pit behind Mistress Alwyn's hut. It was where she threw the spoiled herbs, the old rags, and sometimes, things she did not want to name. But when the frost turned the wells to ice, and fever began its climb again, the villagers came knocking, shivering, coughing, begging for warmth, for life. The cough this time was thick, heavy as mud. Throats swelled until no air passed. The breath came like a groan. Wine gargles no longer worked. Prayers rang hollow. Then, one night, an old shepherd stumbled to Alwyn's door with his wife half dead on his back. Her face was gray, her lips cracked. He dropped to his knees, crying, "Do something, healer, before she leaves me." Alwyn looked at the frozen bucket by her fire, at the useless herbs in her pouch, and then, through the window, at the steaming pile behind her hut. The dung heap. The only thing that still smoked in the cold. She said nothing. Just lifted the woman's limp body, carried her outside, and knelt by the pit. The air stank so strong that even the frost seemed to curl away. Alwyn took off her gloves. She dug a hollow in the steaming filth and laid the woman inside, covering her chest, her legs, her hands. The shepherd wailed, but Alwyn's face stayed calm, eyes closed, whispering something that wasn't quite a prayer. Minutes passed. Then, a cough. A wet, deep cough. The woman gasped, a shudder, then another. Her eyes opened. Steam rose from her hair. She breathed again. By dawn, the story had spread. Dung brings back the dead, they said. Alwyn found warmth where God forgot to look. The next day, 5 more came to her hut, trembling and fevered. They begged for the holy bath. And she gave it, not out of faith, but out of strange hope. She mixed dung with onion and crushed garlic, smeared it across their chests. The stench filled the fields. Flies came early that winter, buzzing like tiny hymns. Some got better. Some did not. But those who lived swore the warmth had saved them, the warmth of earth, not heaven. When Father Howrick heard of it, he rode to her hut, furious. "You bathe souls in filth," he shouted. She only answered, "I bathe bodies, Father. Souls are your concern." He demanded she stop. She didn't. So he tried himself, laid his hand upon a fevered child, prayed, sprinkled holy water. The child's skin turned cold beneath his palm. By evening, the priest was seen behind his church, gathering dung in a wooden bowl. His hands shook, his breath was short. He whispered as he worked, "If God hides in filth, then so be it." The villagers found him there at dawn, asleep against the steaming mound, smiling faintly. No one disturbed him. For a week, no one died. And from that time, in the village ledger, next to the date of the Great Frost, someone had written in brown ink, "The warmth of the earth is the mercy of God." By the time the frost had eaten through the last thatch roofs, Mistress Alwyn's name had become a kind of prayer. They whispered it in doorways, in barns, at bedsides, not loudly, never boldly. The priest's sermon still thundered against her earthly ways, but in the dark hours, when throats rattled and breath came thin, her name was the only one that carried warmth. The pious hands, they began to call her. Not healer, not witch. Something in between. It began after the night she saved the miller's boy. He'd fallen through the ice, half drowned and shivering, his skin pale as tallow. Alwyn had been summoned too late, they thought, his pulse was a whisper. But she knelt beside him, pressing her hands against his chest. Her fingers were cracked, raw from winter, yet steady. She rubbed snow into his limbs, then pressed her palms together, whispering words no one had heard before. Not Latin, not prayer, something older, something from the dirt itself. Her hands glowed faintly in the lamplight, not with fire, but with warmth. The kind that comes before life returns. The boy gasped, coughed, and began to cry. From that night, no one doubted her again. They began to touch her hands when she passed. To kiss her palms. To beg her to bless their tools, their children, even their dead. She resisted at first. But they were desperate, and she, though tired, could not say no. She laid her hands upon the sick, and they whispered that her touch drove the fever away. When she touched the cold, they said the body softened. But strange things began to follow. Those she touched often dreamt of her afterward, dreams of black soil and white frost, of her hands digging through roots, drawing warmth from beneath the ground. One woman woke screaming that Alwyn's fingers had reached into her chest and pulled something out, not pain, not sickness, but a shadow. In the church, Father Howrick trembled. She steals souls, he warned. Every miracle has a price. And yet he came to her one night, cloak heavy with snow, coughing into his sleeve. He said nothing as he knelt. She said nothing as she laid her hands on him. He wept quietly when the pain eased. The next morning, he preached that, the Lord's mercy works through unlikely vessels. And though he never spoke her name, he no longer cursed her. By spring, her hands bore small dark marks, as if burned from within. She wrapped them in linen and worked slower. Still, when people came, she touched them. When they asked why she never rested, she smiled faintly and said, "Because mercy doesn't sleep, not in this cold." And that night, as the frost finally began to melt from the eaves, a faint hum spread through the village, the sound of wind moving through thawing wood, or perhaps of something deeper beneath the soil. Something that had woken at the touch of her hands. By late winter, the village reeked of smoke and sickness. The cold no longer bit sharp, it lingered thick, heavy, sour. Every cottage carried the same smell, burnt tallow, wet wool, breath gone stale. The air was so dense with it that even the snow outside tasted of fat. Mistress Alwyn's hut, once bright with herbs and warmth, had grown dim. The candles she burned now were made from the same tallow she once used to heal, but something had changed in them. They burned longer, yes, but the smoke curled black, leaving a film upon the rafters like soot from a dying hearth. Still, she lit them. Each evening, she lined them on her table, short, squat, yellowish things that oozed when touched, and whispered to their flame. "Light, not fire," she said softly, as if reminding herself. The villagers began to say that Alwyn's candles could heal a cough if one breathed their smoke. So they came, faces pale, eyes ringed, and sat in her hut with candles burning between them. The small room filled with haze, thick as breath in a tomb. Children coughed, men groaned, women murmured prayers half forgotten. The air shimmered faintly, a dull golden fog. Some said they felt lighter after. Others staggered into the snow, dizzy and trembling, saying they'd seen faces in the smoke. One girl said she saw her dead brother smiling inside the candle's flame. Soon, the priest forbade the candles, unholy fumes, he cried from his pulpit. But that night, his own church filled with the same smell. Someone had left a tallow stub burning behind the altar. When he found it, the wax had melted into the shape of a hand. He buried it in the graveyard before dawn. Yet the next morning, his breath still carried the faint scent of burnt fat. As the days dragged on, the fog in the village grew thicker. No wind stirred. Smoke clung low to the roofs, like a ghost reluctant to rise. And through it, Alwyn worked, her skin pale, her hands trembling as she lit another candle, whispering as always. Light, not fire. Mercy, not flame. No one noticed that her eyes had begun to water constantly, as if the smoke itself wept through her. On the seventh night, the villagers awoke to see a glow above her hut, not orange, not red, but dull yellow, like the color of melted bone. It flickered once, then went out. By morning, the hut stood untouched, no fire, no smoke. Only the faint scent of tallow that never seemed to fade. And on her table, every candle had burned itself perfectly flat, except one, which still stood, its wick unlit, waiting. When the snow softened enough for wheels to turn again, a visitor came from the abbey on the hill. He was called Brother Odrin, a thin monk wrapped in layers of grey wool, his face the color of candle smoke. He carried a wooden chest strapped with brass hinges and a folded parchment seal from the abbot himself, permission to observe, record, and contain. He called himself a keeper of temperatures. The villagers didn't know what that meant, but they liked the sound of it. The word keeper had the warmth of safety. Odrin spoke gently, eyes lowered, his voice like snow sliding off a roof. I have come, he said, to weigh the fevers of your souls. He began visiting homes with his strange tools, a long glass tube that fogged when touched, a small balance scale, and strips of linen that he pressed against people's wrists. He would watch the color bloom there, pale pink, dark red, sometimes brown, then mark it down in a little book. Each night, he stayed in Mistress Alwyn's hut, copying his notes by the flickering light of her tallow candles. The two spoke little, yet a quiet understanding passed between them. He admired her precision, her patience. She admired his calm. He believed sickness could be counted, that numbers could calm the wrath of the flesh. She had long stopped believing in such order, yet she listened. Soon, he began to draw small maps of the village, dots and lines showing where the fevers burned brightest. He said the illness moved like music, following a rhythm only he could hear. Alwyn noticed he began to hum as he worked, soft, tuneless hums that matched the crackle of the fire. One evening, he asked for her hand. Not to heal, to measure. He tied a strip of cloth around her wrist, closed his eyes, and whispered, "You burn lower than most. The fever avoids you." Why? She smiled faintly. Perhaps it knows I'm already claimed. That night, Odrin wrote for hours, scratching ink until dawn. When Alwyn awoke, she found his parchment covered not with numbers, but circles. Endless circles, overlapping, spinning outward like frost blooming on glass. He had written in the margins. The heat is not sickness. The heat is memory. Days later, the villagers noticed something strange. When Odrin placed his glass tube near their mouths, it fogged, but the mist inside did not fade. It stayed, swirling gently, glowing faintly in the dark. He called it the breath of souls. He began collecting it. Each night, he sealed the tubes with wax, marking them with the names of the sick. He said he would take their suffering back to the abbey. But one morning, Mistress Alwyn found him kneeling in the snow outside her hut, his box open, the tubes shattered, the mist escaping into the cold. His lips moved as if in prayer, but no sound came. Only steam rose from his mouth, curling upward like the others. He looked at her and whispered, "The fever is in the air, Alwyn. And it listens when we breathe." After that, he stopped measuring. He began praying with his ear pressed to the ground. The frost came back harder than before, sharp as ground glass, brittle as bone. No bird sang. The sky hung like a lid of pewter. Food had become a kind of memory. The grain bins were hollow, the flour gray with mold. Children chewed on frozen turnip rinds, and even the dogs licked stones for taste. Mistress Alwyn tried to share what she could, broth from boiled bark, thin soup of nettles and snow water, but it could not fill the hollow sound in their bellies. Then one night, an old woman came to her hut clutching a small loaf, blackened at the edges, wrapped in cloth that smelled faintly of iron. She said it was a gift of the Lord, baked from the blood of a slaughtered ox mixed with salt. For strength, she whispered, eyes wide. It kept my grandson breathing. Alwyn frowned. Salted blood spoils quick. But the woman shook her head. Not if it's blessed. She tore the bread in two. Steam rose from the crust, though it was cold to the touch. Alwyn gave the smallest piece to a fevered man. He ate, grimaced, swallowed. Within an hour, he slept without coughing. By morning, his skin was cool. The rumor spread faster than the frost. Soon, the villagers began cutting themselves, a small slit in the arm or hand, letting the blood drip into bowls of grain and salt. They baked small loaves by their fires, whispering prayers as they needed, "May pain feed life, may salt seal sin." The bread turned red, then brown, then black. They ate it anyway. The priest, pale and hollow-eyed, stood before them at Sunday Mass and declared, "This is not sacrament. This is sin made dough." But even he could not ignore the truth, those who ate it rarely fell ill again. And so, beneath the altar, where the holy wine was stored, Father Howrick began to mix a few drops of blood into his own cup before drinking. Just a precaution, he told no one. Mistress Alwyn did not join the ritual, but she watched. And she noticed something curious. Those who ate the salted bread began to smell faintly of earth. The same scent that rose from her dung pit when it steamed in the frost. When she cut open a loaf to study it, she found thin white threads woven through the bread, not mold, not grain. Something living, or once living. That night, she burned the loaf. The smoke rose slow and gray, curling toward her roof beams before vanishing. The next morning, a light snow fell, but each flake that landed on the villagers' roofs melted red. They said it was a sign of blessing. She said nothing. But as she watched them eat their red bread and smile through cracked lips, she thought, "The body learns its own prayers when hunger is holy enough." St. Ethelred's shrine stood on the hill above the village, a small stone chapel half swallowed by snow, its wooden door warped and gray, its bell long frozen in place. For months, no one had gone there. The priest had forbidden it, saying the relics had lost their blessing. Faith must be kindled anew, he said, though even he no longer believed his own sermons. But when the salted bread began to run out, and sickness crept back into the children's lungs, someone remembered the old tales, of the saint whose bones cured the plague that once turned blood to dust. So they went. It began with a single woman, then a handful, then nearly half the village trudging through snow with candles cupped in trembling hands. Mistress Alwyn followed at a distance, not to pray, only to watch. Inside, the air was thick with frost and wax smoke. The altar cloth had stiffened into a sheet of ice. Beneath it lay the small silver reliquary, tarnished, cracked, the saint's finger bones sealed within. They lit candles around it. Their flames bent low, as if bowing. Someone began to sing, a broken hymn, half-remembered. Others joined. Their voices were hoarse, but the sound filled the cold stone walls like breath after drowning. Then the first miracle came. A child, too weak to stand, was laid before the shrine. His mother pressed his hand against the reliquary and whispered, "Saint Ethelred, remember mercy." At first, nothing. Then, a shiver. The child's fingers twitched. His chest rose once, twice. His eyes fluttered open. The people gasped. Some fell to their knees, sobbing. "Blessed Ethelred has returned," they cried. Word spread faster than wind. By nightfall, the shrine was crowded with pilgrims, coughing, limping, bleeding, all clutching candles and bits of cloth to touch against the saint's bone. Even Father Howrick came, though he pretended it was to inspect the claims. He stood at the back, hands trembling, eyes wet with something that wasn't just faith. Mistress Alwyn, meanwhile, stood near the door, watching quietly. She saw the bone glow faintly beneath its silver cage, a dull, living amber, like the color of her tallow candles. The air smelled of fat and salt. And when she leaned closer, she heard it, a soft humming from the reliquary, a sound like 1,000 tiny voices sighing in unison. By dawn, the villagers swore their sores had dried, their fevers cooled, their sight sharpened. They called it a miracle. But when Alwyn returned to her hut that morning, her hands trembled. For beneath her nails, she found a thin residue, waxy, pale, and faintly warm. She lit one of her candles, scraped a bit of the residue onto its wick, and watched the flame bloom bright gold for just a moment, before turning black and silent. She blew it out and whispered, "Saints burn just like the rest of us." The miracle did not end the sickness. It only changed its name. By the second week after St. Ethelred's shrine began to glow, the villagers no longer spoke of illness, they spoke of purging. Every cough was a confession, every shiver a sign of divine attention. The air grew heavy with smoke and prayer. Tallow candles burned day and night in every home, their grease running like pale tears down blackened holders. Mistress Alwyn watched their flames quiver as if each were a soul trying to flee its own body. At first, they had come to her for healing. Now, they came for judgment. "Tell me," one man rasped, his neck marked with sores, "how much blood must a sinner lose before the saint forgives him?" Alwyn gave him salt water and linen, but he took the whip instead, lashing himself before her door until his skin gleamed wet in the moonlight. Others followed. They gathered outside her hut, singing hymns that cracked the frost from their lips. Some wore garlands of garlic and nettle, others smeared dung on their faces to mask their sin. When the bell of St. Ethelred's chapel refused to ring, they struck it with stones until it groaned like a dying ox. Father Halric began his sermons again, though his voice trembled with fear rather than faith. The saint tests our flesh, he told them. We must pray harder, bleed cleaner, burn purer. So they prayed until their knees bled through their wool. They burned herbs that filled the streets with sweet, choking smoke. And at night, they sang until their voices turned to coughs. Even the children learned the rhythm of penance. They tied small stones around their wrists to weigh down wickedness. They whispered their sins to the wind and waited for it to freeze before sunrise. Mistress Alwyn could not sleep. Each night she heard them in the distance, the weeping, the chants, the slap of leather whips against bare backs. She sat beside her dying fire, grinding herbs that no one wanted anymore. Once, she had thought the worst thing was disease. Now she saw it was devotion. One dawn, she went to the chapel. Inside, the saint's reliquary glowed brighter than ever, but its silver had begun to melt. The bone within pulsed faintly, as if it had learned to breathe. A woman knelt beside it, her hair matted with wax and blood. She looked up, eyes hollow and shining. The saint hears us, she whispered. He asks for more. Outside, the snow began to fall again, black flakes, soft as ash, melting into the skin like ink. The villagers took it as a sign. They lifted their faces to the sky, mouths open, swallowing the darkness as though it were grace. Mistress Alwyn turned away from the shrine, whispering to herself. The plague is not in our flesh anymore. It's in our prayers. By midwinter, the chapel had turned to ice. Its stone walls were white with frost, its altar stiff with frozen wax. The saints painted on the walls seemed trapped behind thin glass, their eyes dull, their lips sealed beneath a thin sheen of winter. The bell rope hung stiff and motionless, like the neck of a hanged man. The villagers no longer knelt inside. They only stared through the open door, afraid the cold itself had become holy. Mistress Alwyn walked through that door one morning with a pot clutched to her chest. Steam curled from its rim, not sweet, but sour. Inside boiled a mixture of onions, dung, ashes, and wine. Her hands trembled from both chill and guilt. "This is not healing," she muttered, stirring the black mixture with a wooden spoon. It's desperation given shape. She was not alone. Father Halric stood by the altar, his beard crusted with frost. His once white robes were gray now, stiff from smoke and tallow. In his hands he held a bowl of melted candle wax and herbs, a holy balm, he called it, though it smelled like rancid meat. "You bring filth," he said softly, nodding to her pot. She looked at his bowl. "And you bring faith." Between them, the chapel crackled faintly, frost breaking off the stone like thin bones snapping. They set their remedies side by side on the altar. Steam met smoke, and something hissed, a wet, sickly sound. The smell filled the chapel, twisting through the frozen air until even the crucifix above seemed to bend away. The villagers waited outside, clutching their children. They whispered prayers through numb lips, watching the vapors rise from the chapel door. Someone said the smoke looked like souls, another said it smelled like sin burning. Inside, Alwyn's breath misted before her face. Her skin had gone pale, her fingers blue. Still, she stirred. "If the saint won't heal us," she whispered, "then we'll boil our own miracle." Halric crossed himself. His eyes were red, hollow. "The saint hears all things," he said. even blasphemy. But he did not stop her. He leaned over the altar, his own mixture thick and dark, dripping from his fingers like tar. For hours, they worked, one with herbs and dirt, the other with prayers and fire. Outside, the wind howled through the frozen bells, making a sound like laughter. At last, Alwyn lifted her pot and poured it into a bowl carved from a pig's skull. The steam rose in slow, ghostly ribbons. She handed it to Halric. "Drink," she said. He hesitated, but the faithless silence of the chapel pressed on his heart like a stone. He drank. A long moment passed. Then he coughed, hard, and spat into the snow. The spit was black, and it steamed where it fell. "Bitter," he whispered. "But, alive." Alwyn nodded. Then perhaps the cure was never meant to be clean. The villagers began to file inside, one by one, cupping their hands to catch a few drops of the foul potion. Some crossed themselves. Others simply stared, hollow-eyed, as they swallowed. Outside, the frost began to melt around the chapel steps, not from sunlight, but from the strange heat that leaked through the stone. By nightfall, the chapel glowed faintly from within. Some said it was the warmth of healing. Others swore they heard voices in the vapors, prayers that no longer came from human throats. Mistress Alwyn looked into her empty pot and whispered, "Faith or filth, does it matter, if it keeps us breathing?" And the wind outside seemed to answer, "No." In the narrow lane behind the frozen chapel, a widow named Edwin lived alone in a cottage that always smelled of smoke and onions. Her husband had died the winter before, not of plague, but of the cold that came after it. His boots still stood by the door, filled with dust instead of feet. His wool cap hung on a peg, heavy with silence. Each night, Edwin spoke to him as if he had only stepped outside. "Cold again, is it? I'll warm the broth soon." The wind never answered, but the floor creaked as though something invisible still listened. When the coughing began that year, the harsh, wet kind that turned sleep into punishment, Edwin knew it had come for her. Her throat burned like old iron, and her chest rattled like grain in a mill. She remembered Mistress Alwyn's old advice. Onions draw out the poison. Faith keeps it out. So she began her cure. First, she chopped onions until her eyes wept freely, tears that stung more than sorrow ever had. She wrapped the pieces in old linen, yellowed with age and soot, and tied it tight with a bit of her husband's twine. Then she whispered over it, not prayers from the church, but her own broken words. "By the tears of the living, by the breath of the dead, draw it out, draw it out." She pressed the hot poultice to her neck. The sting made her cry out, but she did not move it. Steam rose, thick and bitter. Her skin reddened beneath it, blistering like wax. Outside, the chapel bell groaned again, the wind catching its frozen mouth. Edwin smiled faintly. "He's listening," she whispered, not sure if she meant God or her husband. For 3 nights, she tended the fire, boiling more onions, mixing in ashes when the pain worsened. When she could no longer bear the burn, she smeared wine on her skin and prayed for numbness. When her strength faded, she spoke to the air beside her bed. "You'd like this smell, wouldn't you, love? You always said I cooked too strong." By the 5th day, the cough had gone. But her voice had too. She could no longer speak, only hum. A low, steady sound that filled the cottage like a lullaby for ghosts. The neighbors said they saw smoke from her chimney long after the fire should have died. Some said the widow had been cured. Others said she had joined her husband, and the sound they heard was not humming, but whispering. When Mistress Alwyn came to check on her, she found the door slightly open. Inside, the air was thick with the sweet rot of onions and wine. On the table lay the last poultice, still warm, pulsing faintly, as if breathing. Beside it sat the widow's chair, empty but for a strand of hair and the imprint of a hand pressed into the wood. Alwyn did not touch anything. She bowed her head and whispered, "Faith holds strange cures." Then she closed the door and left the smell behind her, letting it fade into the frost. Outside, the snow began again, soft, slow, and endless. By late winter, the air inside St. Ethelred's chapel had turned thick, not from warmth, but from the stench of things too holy to throw away and too spoiled to save. Jars lined the altar, cracked clay, cloudy glass, and chipped pewter, all filled with what the faithful now called remnants of grace. Inside floated wilted herbs, rosemary blackened with mildew, sage turned to slime, thyme so old it no longer smelled of anything but damp earth. Some held water from the chapel's font, others rain caught from the roof gutters, frozen and thawed again until it gleamed dull and gray. Father Howrick called it holy water still blessed by winter's hand. He believed the frost itself preserved its purity. Mistress Alwyn said nothing. She had learned that silence kept one safer than truth. The villagers came with little jars and bowls, asking for drops of blessing. They cupped their palms, trembling, as Howrick dipped his fingers into the clouded water and touched their foreheads. The liquid left a faint green smear, sometimes sticky, sometimes burning. When the first rash appeared on a child's face, they said it was a sign of sanctification. When more followed, lips blistered, eyes weeping yellow tears, they called it the mark of chosen suffering. The herbs had grown strange in the cold. Some gave off a faint light when burned, others released smoke that made people dream of saints walking through snow. A few villagers began to sleep with the herbs beneath their pillows, whispering to them as if they could speak. Alwyn watched the change spread, not just in skin, but in faith. They no longer wanted healing. They wanted proof. Proof that pain meant something. Proof that the sickness had a listener. One evening, she entered the chapel to find Howrick at the font, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He was mixing the herbs with more holy water, his hands stained green, his breath heavy with incense and decay. "Father," she said softly, "the herbs have turned." He smiled weakly, not looking up. "Then so must we." He reached into the water and lifted a handful of the mixture. It dripped slowly, thick as oil, flecked with stems and mold. "Every cure is born of rot," he murmured. "Even grace." Alwyn backed away. The sound of dripping filled the chapel, echoing like slow rain on stone. Outside, the villagers knelt in the snow, waiting to be anointed. One by one, they leaned forward as the foul mixture touched their faces, some weeping with gratitude, others shivering with fever. Steam rose from their skin in the cold air, as though their faith itself were burning away. By dawn, the chapel reeked of sanctified decay. Flies buzzed near the altar despite the frost. The water in the font had gone almost black, yet Howrick's hands kept moving, dipping, blessing, smearing. When Alwyn finally left, the cold wind felt cleaner than prayer. She walked home clutching her cloak tight, whispering to the night. Holy water and rotten herbs, perhaps that's all we ever were. And the wind, cold and colorless, whispered back. Amen. The frost had grown thick enough to swallow footsteps, and for a long time, the village was silent, too weak even to pray. Then one morning, before the sun rose, the bells began to ring. They did not ring by human hands. No one climbed the tower. No rope moved. But still they tolled, deep, heavy, and clean, their sound rolling through the snow like slow thunder. The villagers woke in wonder. The sick sat up in bed. Children pressed their faces to the window slits, eyes wide and shining. The saint calls us, someone whispered. His mercy rings again. They poured into the streets, wrapped in rags and frost-bitten hope. Fathers carried coughing sons, mothers dragged their pale daughters through the drifts. Even Mistress Alwyn came, her hands shaking beneath her cloak, her breath a thin ghost in the frozen air. At the chapel steps, the air felt alive, each toll of the bell made the frost quiver on the stones. Inside, the altar glowed faintly, haloed by smoke. Father Howrick knelt there, face turned upward, eyes closed. He did not seem to notice the crowd behind him. The bells grew louder. Their rhythm slowed, and between each ring came a low hum, like a voice buried in metal, whispering words too old to understand. The villagers dropped to their knees. Some wept. Others began to sing through cracked lips, their hymns trembling with both joy and fear. For the first time in weeks, Alwyn felt warmth in her chest, not fever, but something close to faith. Maybe this was the end of suffering. Maybe the saint had heard after all. She leaned against the doorframe, watching the people lift their faces toward the unseen sound. And for one fragile moment, the village seemed beautiful again. The snow glittered. The candles shone like stars. The smell of rot and smoke was replaced by something sweet, faintly like flowers, faintly like ash. Then the bells began to change. Their tone cracked, higher, shriller, until it was no longer a melody, but a scream. The sound tore through the air, splitting the stillness like lightning. Windows shattered. Candles burst, spilling wax like blood. The villagers clutched their ears, crying out. Children screamed. Dogs barked and fled. Howrick fell forward at the altar, his head striking the stone. The bell's voice did not stop, it grew sharper, faster, as though some wild hand was inside it, shaking the metal with fury. When it finally ceased, the silence that followed was worse than the sound. The villagers looked up, dazed, blinking. Then, slowly, one by one, they began to smile. The ringing drove it away, someone said. My cough is gone, said another. Look, the frost is melting. And it was true. A thin sheen of water spread over the chapel floor, shining in the candlelight. Skin flushed warm again. Breath came easier. They cheered, sobbing with relief. The bells had healed them, they said. The saint had answered. Mistress Alwyn stood apart from them, heart pounding. She looked at Father Howrick, still collapsed near the altar, his hand twitching faintly. When she turned him over, his eyes were open, wide, glassy, and colorless. From his mouth drifted a faint wisp of steam, smelling of iron. And somewhere far above, the great bell swayed once more. Not ringing, not moving. Just breathing. The bells had gone silent again. But their echo lingered, not in the air, but in the bones. A week after the ringing, a stranger arrived from the south, limping through the snow with a bundle strapped to his back and frost biting his face. He called himself a pilgrim of St. Ethelred, sent by visions of light and pain. No one asked from where, no one cared. In those days, any man who walked toward the village rather than away from it was already half a miracle. He carried with him a relic, a small bone, yellow-white and wrapped in stained silk. He claimed it was the saint's toe. Father Halric, pale and trembling from the bell's aftermath, welcomed him to the chapel. Mistress Alwyn stood in the corner, silent as always, her eyes sharp beneath her hood. When the relic was unwrapped, the smell filled the room, not of holiness, but of something left too long in the dark. Still, the people gasped. They knelt. Some even cried. The pilgrim lifted the bone high, his cracked lips whispering Latin prayers that had lost their meaning somewhere in the echo. He declared that those who touched the relic would never again feel the bite of plague, nor the frost of despair. The line began before sunset. Villagers shuffled forward barefoot through the snow, leaving red trails behind them. Each one bent low, pressing their lips or their foreheads to the shriveled toe. Some kissed it. Others licked it. A few bit off flakes of the crumbling bone, swallowing them with eyes shut tight. Halric did not stop them. He stood behind the altar, trembling, his breath shallow. When Alwyn tried to speak, to remind him that relics were not meant to be consumed, he raised a hand to silence her. Faith must be taken into the body, he said hoarsely. Only then does it heal. By nightfall, the relic was smaller. The pilgrim smiled, though his lips bled. He claimed it was a sign, the saint's flesh willingly feeding the faithful. But Alwyn noticed something else. The pilgrim's limp had worsened. His left foot left no full print in the snow. When she followed the trail he left behind, she found drops of blood, dark, thick, steaming faintly in the cold. Later that night, she entered the chapel alone. The pilgrim slept near the altar, his body curled like a question mark. Beside him, his boot lay open. Inside was a bandaged stump where his smallest toe should have been. Alwyn stared, her breath trembling in her throat. The saint's relic, the miracle bone, was not ancient. It was his. She covered the boot and left quietly, her mind a storm of frost and pity. Outside, the snow had turned gray under the moonlight. By morning, the pilgrim was gone, vanished before dawn. But the villagers still believed. They said their cheeks had warmed, their coughs had eased, their sores had dried. They said the saint had walked among them. Mistress Alwyn only whispered to herself as she mixed new herbs at her fire. The toe was fresh. The miracle still bleeding. And above the chapel, where the wind whistled through the empty bell tower, something small, pale and curved, hung caught in a crack of stone. A bone. It swayed gently, tapping against the wall in the cold. A rhythm. A heartbeat. A reminder that even holiness has flesh. Winter deepened, and the world turned white. Not the soft white of peace, but the kind that silences, the kind that smothers. Snow filled every crack of every door, wrapped around chimneys, and muffled even the church bell's faint creak. The air no longer moved. Smoke from the hearths rose only a little before curling back down, as if too weary to climb. The pilgrim's visit had become legend by now. Children whispered that he had walked barefoot into the hills and vanished into the frost, that the saint had taken him home. Old men swore they could still see his footprints glowing faintly beneath the ice. Mistress Alwyn, who knew the truth, said nothing. The sickness had quieted, or perhaps simply paused. People spoke of healing, but none looked truly well. They moved slower now, their faces pale, their voices hoarse from too many prayers. Father Halric still gave his sermons, though only a handful came to listen. He spoke softly, almost to himself, about purity, patience, and penance, words that froze in the air and fell like dust. Behind him, the saint's altar stood heavy with frost, the last candle long burned out. Superstitions filled the silence. Some hung frogs from the rafters again, their dried skins clinking faintly like bells in the wind. Others drew circles in the snow with ashes to keep the plague spirits away. A few began to whisper to their shadows before sleep, begging them not to leave in the night. At dusk, the snow turned blue. That was when the villagers said the dead walked home, not to haunt, but to listen. People left bowls of broth on their windowsills, small loaves of bread near the doors, and sometimes a coin pressed into the snow, for the saint's toll. Mistress Alwyn sat by her hearth, the last of her herbs crumbling in her lap. Her hands trembled from cold and memory. She could still smell the onion, the dung, the bitter smoke. So many cures, she thought, yet nothing cured the silence. Once, she heard knocking at her door, 3 soft taps, slow and deliberate. When she opened it, no one stood there. Only the wind blew in, carrying a handful of snow that melted on her floor like tears. That night, she dreamt of the pilgrim's foot, walking alone through a field of frost, leaving no prints behind. The bells in the distance tolled once, faint, hollow, uncertain. And in her dream, she whispered back. Faith was louder when it hurt. When she woke, dawn had not yet come. The fire was dead, the room colder than the world outside. But on her table lay something that had not been there before, a small piece of linen, folded neatly. Inside it, a single toe bone. When the frost began to soften, so did the faith. Snow turned to slush, and with it came the smell, a thick, sour scent that crawled through the alleys and clung to the wool of every cloak. At first, they thought it was the tannery. Then the pig sheds. Then someone said, it comes from the healer's house. Mistress Alwyn had kept her remedies in a wooden barrel beside the hearth, her old pride, her vat of mercy. Inside were onion poultices, crushed garlic, vinegar-soaked cloth, and a handful of herbs saved from before the frost. People came to her for everything, fever, cough, even a broken heart. But one morning, when she opened the lid, the mercy turned to horror. A rat floated there, swollen, gray, half dissolved in the sour mix of her cures. Its little hands were folded on its chest as though in prayer. The sight made her drop the ladle. The sound, plop, plop, echoed like mockery. The smell spread. By midday, the whole village knew. Some said it was a sign of her pride. Others whispered it was punishment, that the saint had sent the rat to remind her that healing was not for mortal hands. Children threw pebbles at her door, chanting, "Rat wife, rot wife, stirring sin and sorrow." Yet when Father Halric came to see, he found something worse. The remedies had been used, the villagers had already taken doses from that barrel. They had rubbed the rot into their wounds, swallowed it with honey, and blessed it in the saint's name. By evening, half the village was vomiting. Mistress Alwyn fell to her knees before the altar, clutching her pestle like a rosary. She begged forgiveness, from God, from the dead, from the rat. In her fevered guilt, she thought she heard the creatures squeak in the rafters, not of pain, but of laughter. The barrel was emptied into the snow. The dark liquid hissed as it met the cold, steaming like breath from the mouth of hell. But even as it vanished, some villagers knelt and touched the blackened snow to their lips. Because they believed, if poison could come from God's will, then surely, so could healing. That night, a child died. And the next morning, Father Howrick declared, "No one shall mix medicine without my blessing again." The people obeyed. But in the dark, the rats came back, not one, not two, but dozens, scratching softly at the church door, as though demanding communion. The bells of St. Ethelred's had grown weary. They no longer rang with joy or warning, only with duty, as if sound itself had tired of the living. And beneath those tired bells knelt Brother Matthias, alone in the chapel, whispering his confession to an empty chair. He had not meant for things to turn this way. When the first frost came, he had believed, truly believed, that the Lord tested them for strength, not for suffering. But each night, more bodies were buried beneath the snow, and his prayers grew shorter, weaker, quieter. Until, one morning, he stopped saying, "Amen." It began with small sins, tasting the wine meant for the sick, pretending to bless herbs that had already spoiled, smiling when the dying thanked him for miracles. Then came the greater one. He had seen the miracle bread, the salted loaves darkened with blood, and in secret, he baked one for himself. He said the words, made the sign, and ate. He waited for warmth, for holiness, for the light of grace to fill his chest. But all he felt was hunger, a deeper, emptier hunger than before. And so he ate again. And again. Until his lips were stained red, and his tongue cracked from salt. When the villagers began to fall ill again, he knew why. He had taken their blessing and turned it to blight. For weeks, Brother Matthias carried that knowledge like a stone beneath his robe. Every prayer was a lie, every sermon a wound. He dreamt of rats crawling across the altar, of their small sharp teeth whispering psalms. He dreamt of Mistress Alwyn burning her herbs in the snow and hearing them scream. And tonight, in the cold hollow silence of the chapel, he had come to tell it all. But Father Howrick was gone. Only the carved confessional stood waiting, its wood dark with candle smoke and old sweat. Matthias stepped inside. He spoke softly, like one speaking to a ghost. "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I took their faith and made it flesh. I turned their bread to poison, their prayers to hunger. I fed upon their hope. And now the Lord feeds upon me." He waited for a voice, for the calm, familiar reply, "God forgives." But only silence answered. Then, from the other side of the screen, a sound. Not words. A slow, wet chewing. Matthias froze. He leaned close. And through the small wooden lattice, he saw two glimmering eyes, black and bright as oil. The rat, or something wearing its shape, tilted its head and smiled. Matthias fell back, gasping. The confessional door swung open. The candles flared and went out. And when morning came, the monks found him still inside, his tongue shriveled, his eyes open, his hands clasped as if in final prayer. They said he died confessing. But no one could say to whom. When the frost finally loosened its hold on the earth, the villagers of St. Ethelred's thought it was mercy. The air softened, the river began to whisper again beneath the ice. And so, they decided to hold a fair, the first in months, to give thanks, to trade, to remember that life still breathed somewhere beneath the sickness. They called it the Fair of Hope. But even hope, by then, was pale and trembling. Stalls were built from broken carts, decorated with ragged ribbons stiff from the cold. Children with hollow cheeks sold jars of melted snow as holy water. A monk's apprentice offered saint's bread, crusts soaked in vinegar and wine, for a coin or a prayer. Everywhere, people coughed into their hands and smiled anyway. Mistress Alwyn walked among them like a ghost. The smell of onions, herbs, and old smoke followed her. Some greeted her kindly, others crossed themselves as she passed. She bought nothing. She sold nothing. But she watched. At the center of the fair stood a small wooden stage, hastily built from coffin boards. On it, Father Howrick addressed the crowd. He held up a crude wooden cross and declared, "By our faith, the frost has fled. By our prayers, the Lord has spared us. Now we give thanks, not with gold, but with the works of our hands and the faith of our hearts." The crowd cheered, thin and weary. A few people fainted. Then came the healers, peddlers from neighboring villages carrying bottles of colored liquid, powders in cloth bags, and tiny bones strung on cords. They shouted their remedies in sing-song voices. For fever, swallow frog ash. For cough, rub honey on your feet. For the devil in your dreams, wear this dried bat around your neck. Coins clinked, hands reached, and hope, sickly, feverish hope, filled the square. Even the dying came crawling, clutching candles and charms. But by afternoon, a wind rose, bitter and sharp, sweeping through the market. It carried a smell that none could name, sweet and rotten at once. The candles flickered blue. And from beneath the stage, something dripped, slow, dark, and thick. When a boy bent down to look, he found a sack tucked under the boards. Inside were the remains of dead rats, dozens of them, tied together with twine and soaked in wine. Someone had buried them there, beneath the cross and the priest's feet. The fair erupted into chaos. Some screamed that it was witchcraft. Others said it was a blessing gone wrong. Father Howrick raised his hands, shouting, "Peace! Peace, in the name of..." But his voice broke into coughing. Thick red spittle fell on the stage. And for the first time, the villagers saw the sores on his neck, small, round, oozing like candle wax. The fair ended in silence. No one sang. No one prayed. Only the wind spoke, rattling the wooden signs and carrying away the last laughter. By dusk, the stalls were empty. The ribbons hung limp in the cold. And the villagers said the fair would never be held again. They renamed it in whispers. The Fair of Sickly Hope. After the Fair of Sickly Hope, the church doors stayed closed for 7 days. No bells rang. No prayers rose. Only the crows kept watch over St. Ethelred Square, black stains against the pale winter sky. Inside, the priests met in whispers. They blamed the healers. The women with roots and jars. The smell of herbs that clung to every sleeve and corner. They said it was not faith that was failing, but obedience. And so they made a choice: the cures must burn. On the 8th morning, Father Haurik led a procession through the village. He was pale, trembling, but his eyes burned like fevered candles. Behind him came the monks, Brother Ewan, Brother Piers, and the younger ones who still believed in holy punishment. They carried bundles of herbs seized from every house: rosemary, thyme, garlic, nettle, wormwood, tied in twine and dripping with vinegar. The villagers followed, silent. Even Mistress Alwyn came, her hands red from grinding onions and ash. They gathered in the square. A pit had been dug where the fair's stage once stood. Father Haurik raised his hand and declared, "These weeds have deceived us. They promised healing and brought only death. Let their smoke rise as prayer to heaven, and may the Lord forgive our folly." He dropped the first torch. The flame caught slowly, hissing as the green stems shriveled and curled. Soon, smoke rose thick and white, carrying the sharp scent of medicine turning to bitterness. Mistress Alwyn could not watch. She turned away, her eyes watering, not from the smoke, but from something older, heavier. The herbs she had dried for months, the small roots gathered under moonlight, the leaves she had rubbed between her palms like prayers, all turned to grey dust. The villagers coughed and sneezed as the fumes rolled over them. Some wept, others shouted Amen. But within an hour, the first to fall was Father Haurik himself. He stumbled, clutching his throat, the smoke rising around him like a ghostly robe. The monks carried him inside, his mouth foaming, whispering still, "Burn, burn it all." By nightfall, the village reeked of burnt rosemary and death. The snow turned black where the smoke had settled. And though they said the pit was holy, no one dared walk near it again. That night, Mistress Alwyn sat beside her window, grinding what few herbs she had hidden under her floorboards. Outside, the sky glowed faintly from the embers. It looked almost beautiful, like stars scattered low upon the earth. She whispered to herself, "When faith fears the cure, the sickness becomes the saint." And somewhere, beneath the wind, she thought she heard it whisper back. The village of St. Ethelred's had grown quieter after the burning. The air still smelled of ash and rosemary, a sweetness that stung the lungs. Most doors stayed shut, curtains drawn, the people afraid to breathe too deeply, as though the smoke itself might remember them. But in the chapel, where the holy relic lay, a withered hand said to belong to St. Ethelred himself, someone still came each night. A child. Her name was Lisa, daughter of the gravedigger. Small, pale, hair like damp straw, she would slip into the church after dusk, barefoot and silent. She would lie down beside the relic's glass case, curling her small body against the cold stone floor, and whisper to the saint as though he were a friend. No one knew when she began doing it, perhaps after her mother's fever, perhaps after her father stopped speaking. The priests said nothing. They found her there one morning, asleep, her face calm, a faint smile on her lips. And when they tried to move her, she did not stir. It was as though she were dreaming in prayer. That day, the village buzzed with quiet awe. "Saint Ethelred watches over her," they said. "She sleeps in his grace." Mistress Alwyn came to see. The child lay in a shaft of pale light, the glass case fogged with her breath. Her small hand rested just an inch from the saint's shriveled fingers. And between them, where the air shimmered faintly, the frost had melted into a single clear droplet of water. When Father Howrick, weaker now, voice rasping like burnt parchment, touched that droplet, he felt warmth. He called it a miracle. The villagers gathered by night to watch her sleep. Some prayed, others left offerings, crusts of bread, sprigs of ash, bits of cloth. And every morning, Lisa woke smiling. Her cheeks were pink, her cough gone. Within a week, whispers spread that those who touched the floor where she slept felt their pain ease. A lame man walked without his cane. A mother said her child's fever broke. Hope returned, soft, trembling, fragile, like light through frost. But then came the seventh night. Lisa did not wake. Her body was still warm, her face serene, but her breath was gone. The droplet between her hand and the relic had turned red, not with blood, but with something darker, thicker. The priests declared her taken by the saint. They wrapped her in linen, laid her beside the altar, and told the people her death was proof of divine mercy. Mistress Alwyn said nothing. But when she leaned close to the relic's case, she saw frost creeping inside the glass, around the saint's hand, forming the shape of a small child's palm. That night, she dreamt of Lisa again, standing in the chapel doorway, smiling faintly, whispering, "It's warm here, beneath the glass. The saint says the cold keeps the sickness away." And when Alwyn woke, her hands smelled faintly of iron and lilies, like relics, or graves, or both. After the child's death, the village no longer feared the cold. They feared warmth. It was said that Lisa's body did not decay. A week passed, then two, and still her skin remained soft, her lips faintly pink, her eyes half open, as if the frost had chosen to keep her. Father Howrick called it the winter's blessing. Mistress Alwyn called it a warning. But no one listened. They began to visit her body like pilgrims, kneeling, praying, whispering their fevers into the stone. And when they left, some swore their coughs had stopped, their bones ached less, their skin cooled. The church filled with offerings, candles, dried herbs, and jars of melted snow mixed with bits of hair or thread. Soon, the priests could not keep up with the crowds. To control the offerings, they began crafting winter charms, small candles made from wax and crushed worms, each blessed beside Lisa's bier. They called them worm candles. The people believed that when burned, the worms' souls crawled into the smoke and carried sickness away. Each home lit one. And for a time, it seemed to work. The air smelled faintly of honey and earth. Fevered children slept. The dying whispered of warmth in their chests. But Mistress Alwyn noticed something else. When she crushed one of the worm candles between her fingers, the wax was damp, not from water, but from something alive inside. Tiny white worms, still moving, glistened under the candlelight. She burned them in her hearth, yet their smell lingered, sweet, cloying, wrong. Soon, those who burned the candles began to change. Their skin paled, their lips lost color, and when they spoke, their breath misted even in warmth. Their eyes turned glassy, not lifeless, but preserved, like the holy relic in its glass case. And though they swore they felt stronger, their pulse slowed, their touch grew cold. By the 10th day, Mistress Alwyn's hands trembled as she wrote in her journal. The worms eat the rot, and what they leave behind does not die. The cure is not healing, it is keeping. She went to Father Howrick, desperate. He lay in his bed, face thin as parchment, yet smiling faintly. Around him burned 12 worm candles. The air shimmered, heavy and golden, as if the worm's smoke itself had grown holy. He whispered, "The saint is with us, child. We will not rot. We will not freeze. We will remain." His hand, pale, waxen, perfect, reached toward her. When she touched it, it felt like carved candle wax, soft yet dead. That night, she left the chapel. Snow fell again, silent, endless. And as she walked home, she saw the windows of every house glowing with candlelight, each one flickering with the same faint hum, a low, steady sound, like worms chewing wood. Mistress Alwyn stopped, looked at the horizon, and whispered, "The winter has found its cure. And it no longer needs the living." It began without warning. No thunder, no scream, only a stillness that seemed to press against the heart like a hand made of ice. The worm candles went out one by one. First in the chapel, then in the homes, then even in the graveyard where Lisa slept beneath her linen shroud. No breeze touched them, the flames simply bent low, shivered, and died. Mistress Alwyn woke to the dark. Her house smelled of smoke and cold wax. The air tasted faintly of iron. She tried to relight her candle, but the flame would not catch. Even the coals in her hearth refused to glow. Outside, the village was silent. No dogs barked. No bells rang. Even the wind had stopped moving. Then came the sound, soft, slow, like something dragging itself across snow. She stepped outside. The moon was pale and low, wrapped in thin clouds. And there, in the middle of the square, stood the villagers. Dozens of them. Still. Unmoving. Each holding a worm candle in one hand. Their faces were pale, almost luminous, eyes open and glassy. Frost crept along their brows, their lashes, the corners of their lips. But none of them breathed. Mistress Alwyn called out. No one turned. She stepped closer and saw that the wax from their candles had melted down their hands and hardened, fusing flesh to wax. The candles and the people had become one. At the center of them all knelt Father Howrick, his robe stiff with ice. The relic of Saint Ethelred lay before him, the shriveled hand now bright as bone, fingers outstretched as though in blessing. From its fingertips dripped clear water, drop after drop, hissing where it touched the frozen ground. Each drop steamed, though the air was colder than death. And then, the voices began. Faint, at first, a low hum rising from the throats of the still villagers. Not words. Not song. Just a sound, the sound of breath remembering itself. Alwyn fell to her knees. She covered her ears, but still the hum grew louder. The relic's hand trembled. The ice beneath the villagers' feet cracked like splitting bone. And one by one, the worm candles began to burn again, but with no flame, only light, pale and sickly as the moon. Alwyn whispered. This isn't healing. This is keeping the dead awake. Her voice vanished into the hum. The saint's hand twitched once more. And with a final shiver, Father Howrick's head lifted. His mouth opened, not to pray, but to breathe out a long sigh of smoke. The relic cracked. The glass case shattered. And the light went out. When morning came, the square was empty. Only footprints remained, and the faint smell of burnt honey and frost. The villagers were gone. The church doors hung open, frost curling up their hinges like lace. And on the altar, where the relic had been, lay a single worm, perfectly still, curled in the shape of a cross. Mistress Alwyn found it, wrapped it in cloth, and whispered, "Even worms need rest." She buried it in the snow. Then she walked toward the woods, where the frost had not yet reached. And for the first time all winter, the sky began to thaw, soft light spilling like breath over the dead village of St. Ethelred's. The morning never came. The horizon stayed locked in twilight, a pale bruise of light that neither rose nor faded. Snow had buried the lanes of St. Ethelred's. The houses stood half-swallowed, their roofs sagging under white silence. Only the steeple remained visible, pointing toward a sky that no longer answered. Mistress Alwyn stood at the edge of the village, her shawl stiff with frost. The air was heavy, the kind that holds breath hostage in the lungs. Every sound seemed afraid to exist. Her footsteps left no echo, only shallow prints that filled again with falling ash. Yes, not snow, but ash. Soft as flour, gray as the inside of a hearth long gone cold. It drifted down from nowhere, and when she touched it, it smudged her skin like soot. She walked toward the chapel. The doors were open wide, as though the building itself had exhaled its last prayer. Inside, the pews were dusted in white ash. The altar was bare, no relic, no candles, no warmth. Only a circle of black marks where the villagers had once stood, their worm candles melted into their hands. Their light was gone now. Only their shape remained, faint silhouettes scorched into the stone floor, as if light itself had remembered their bodies. Alwyn knelt beside one of the marks. She placed her palm upon the cold stone and whispered, "I'll remember you as warmth." Her voice broke. The sound scattered into the rafters, where icicles hung like crystal tongues. Then she saw it, the relics box, shattered but not empty. Inside, among shards of glass and frozen wax, something glowed faintly. A thread of silver light, pulsing like a heartbeat. She reached in and lifted it. It was a strand of hair, pale as moonlight, brittle as frost. St. Ethelred's last trace. For a moment, the chapel filled with whispering. Soft. Endless. Voices too thin to understand, weaving through the air like smoke. The air smelled of honey and burnt feathers. The frozen windows began to weep, tears of thaw melting down the glass. Alwyn stepped back, clutching the strand. And for a breath, she saw them, the villagers, not as corpses, not as shadows, but as flickering shapes of light, standing all around her. Their faces calm. Their eyes like polished bone. They looked at her with something almost kind. And then, one by one, they fell into dust, into ash, into nothing. The moon above the steeple turned red. Its light spilled down like old blood across the snow. Mistress Alwyn walked into it, her figure vanishing into the crimson haze. The strand of silver hair in her hand caught the moonlight and burned, slowly, beautifully, until nothing was left but a curl of smoke rising toward the sky. The ash stopped falling. The silence deepened. And in that silence, the world seemed to whisper a single word, soft and final. Rest. The snow closed over St. Ethelred's. The wind forgot its name. And beneath the frozen moon, the ashes slept, holy, nameless, eternal. The snow melted slowly, as if reluctant to surrender. Each drip from the rooftop sounded like a clock restarting after a long, silent winter. The river near St. Ethelred's began to move again, sluggish at first, dragging along bits of ice and dead twigs, as if pulling the memory of winter behind it. By March, small green shoots pushed through the ash. They were thin and pale, like they feared the light. Children from nearby villages came to the ruins to pick them, whispering that the flowers grew from holy ground. The elders said nothing. They only watched, with the weary eyes of those who have seen prayers turn into curses. The chapel was gone now, half sunk into the thawing earth. The steeple had collapsed, lying across the graveyard like a fallen cross. Only one wall stood, covered in moss and soot. On it, someone had carved with a trembling hand. Faith does not cure, it remembers. No one knew who wrote it. Some said it was Mistress Alwyn, though she had vanished that red moon night. Others said it was carved by Brother Matthias before he burned the herbs. But whoever left it, their words remained, even as the wind peeled the stones bare. By mid-spring, the air was softer. Birds returned. The world seemed to breathe again. And yet, in the warmth, something else stirred. A cough. At first, faint. Then many. The travelers who passed through the valley began to fall sick by the second night. Fever burned through them faster than winter frost ever had. The local healer, a girl no older than 16, boiled onion and garlic, mixed ash with wine, and prayed over their chests. It did nothing. One evening, as she knelt beside a patient, the candlelight caught her wrist, and there, under her skin, small black veins twisted like cracks in ice. She gasped. The sickness was old, but not gone. It had waited beneath the ground, breathing through the roots and bones, quiet as soil, until spring gave it warmth again. The villagers buried the sick in the same field where the snowdrops grew. Each grave was marked with a bundle of dried herbs and a smooth river stone, carved with the sign of the cross. The wind passed over them and whispered, not cruelly, but as though reminding the living of something long forgotten. By summer, travelers avoided the valley altogether. They called it the Field of Ashes. Children grew up hearing stories of the winter that never truly ended. And somewhere beneath the thawed earth, a single silver hair lay curled among the roots, still glowing faintly when the moon rose. As if St. Ethelred's breath still lingered. As if faith itself refused to die. And as if the sickness, in some quiet, unseen way, was only waiting for another winter to come.